Okay, we're going to split this. I'm going to do the first part. Is that too loud? And then Sean's going to finish it up. And I really we're going to try to look at changing family structures in rural China and rural households in migrant communities, and really trying to look at health, nutrition, education outcomes, their human capital. And I'm going to spend a little time telling you where our data came from, because we're going to use it in different ways throughout this. But then we're going to look at, rural families in rural areas and what's the nature of that family and how it's changed over time. And then look at its, is that okay? Oh, okay. And then we're going to look at migrant families in urban areas and do the same type of thing. I'll quit then, and then Sean's really going to get up and talk about how different types of families. So we're going to be looking at sort of family composition in each of these segments, and then he's going to look at how these different types of families are responding different to policies, and to sort of understand behavior out in this. And this is very preliminary. We've just been working for the past couple months putting the data together. So my organization is called the Rural Education Action Project or Program. We're based at Stanford, but we have collaborators sort of all over China. It's an umbrella group. And the reason that this is going to be important is that we work through these groups in these different areas to run large-scale randomized trials, mainly in education, health, and nutrition, to truly understand the gaps between rural and urban areas. And then what we do in these areas, we design and implement new programs. So we do program evaluation of our own programs. And then what we're doing increasingly is working with the government and designing rollouts of new programs, investments, and then we evaluate whether they work or not. And we work in 4 areas, and you're going to see, so we do interventions in health, nutrition, and education, keeping kids in school, so that's more focused on secondary school, technology, human capital, and teaching. Over the past 10 years, we've run sort of almost 50 large-scale randomized controlled trials out in these areas. And of course, we have data from all 50 of them. We've now taken 30 of these and stacked them on top of each other. And we're going to use them both as the baselines from these experiments as sort of observational data. And then Sean's going to be looking at actually using these interventions and looking at responses. We'll look at response by family types. So let's go. So what's the nature of the rural family? This was actually, we saw some slides from Junsun this morning that was sort of very much like this. I was one of the very first Americans to be able to go into rural China and collect data on a very small data set. And it was actually almost exactly what Junsun put up there. At that time in the late 80s, the average family size was 6, and about half of families were lived with their parents. Sometimes it was a rotating parent, so the parent would rotate from son to son. And everyone, 93% of kids lived with both mom and dad at home. We're going to call these children living with parents, or CLPs. Only 1% of all households were left behind children. So we're mom and dad, so in the late 80s. A lot of this presentation is going to look at the difference between, we call them children living with their parents or left behind children. And when I use LBCs, and this one I'm going to talk about pure LBCs, so both parents are gone. We also can look at dads are gone and mom's home, et cetera. So 30 years later, what does it look like? Junsheng had up there the average rural family for all of China is 3.2. These are mostly, as you're going to see, poor rural areas. It's 3.9. Only 27% of families have a grandparents living with them. And what we're really going to be interested in is the composition of these families. So to look at composition, we've stacked up 19 of our data sets, and they come from 10 different provinces. You can see there's 119 counties and about 2,000 schools or villages. So all these are school-based or village-based interventions. These are the baselines from those. Here are the descriptive statistics from all those, and there's about 133,000 students that we're going to be looking at. All the data are from the same research team. We had the same sampling strategy, the same data collection instruments, and one of the questions we asked were family composition. Asking the kid, or the kid took a survey home to their parents, and they said, what's the structure of your family? I live with both my parents at home. Dad is out migrated, mom's home, mom's out working, dad's home. Lots of those are broken families. So the type 3 are, mom, it's divorced family, or there's mom has died, or something like that. But there are some moms out working, dad's home. There's not very many of those. And then, of course, there's true left behind children where both parents are out working. So here's the results. If you look at all 133,000 kids, you find that still about 60% of these kids, 56% of these kids are living with both parents, while 15% are true left behind kids. Much higher is fathers out migrated, mothers at home. That's almost a quarter. And so so what are you talking about? You're talking about ages 6 to 15. That's really the relevant age range. 10 years. Our cohort's probably a little overestimated, but let's be conservative. 20 million children per year. Half of these are in poor rural areas. Again, we're being conservative. It's probably about 45% of them, which in if 15% are true left behind children, that means there's about 150 million, 1.5 million of these left behind children. For the 10 years of that cohort, there's really only about 15 million. The number that gets thrown around all around China is there's 70 to 80 million left behind children. It's actually not true. It's much, even in this conservative estimate. It's a lot of kids, but it's not anything up near the range that often gets thrown around. So take all the kids together. So this is kids living with their parents, left behind kids, kids live with their fathers out migrated. And if you look at their outcomes in terms of nutrition, health, and education, what we see is that there's a lot of vulnerability out in rural China today. These are all 2009 to 2013. 27% of them are malnourished. They have iron deficiency anemia. 33% of these kids have intestinal worms. 20% of them are myopic. They can't see. 1 out of 8 has glasses. So there's probably 20% of the kids have vision problems, and they aren't treated. These are they're wasted, they're stunted. Their math scores compared to urban kids are 2 to 3 years behind urban kids in terms of math, Chinese, and English. 20% of them drop out of junior high. So if you look at the Ministry of Education's statistical yearbook, 1% of kids drop out of junior high. But what we see is in these samples, it's clearly 20% is a very conservative estimate, are not finishing junior high school. And there's some at health for mental risk, for anxiety and depression, almost 3/4 of them have risks involved, okay? So this is not a very healthy set of children out there. So now let's compare left behind children to children living with their parents. And if you read the press, if you're in ministry, they're there's a lot of concern about these poor left behind children that are very vulnerable. And so is that who's behind these very high rates of poor health, nutrition, and education? And what we see when we compare children living with their parents to left behind kids, in every single indicator, absolutely every single indicator of nutrition, health, or education, left behind children do better than children living with their parents. Okay, so that there's not one where left behind children are worse. Now we're going to get to why, start to think about why now. But so if we're purely thinking about targeting who is vulnerable out there, we shouldn't be putting more resources into these left behind children because it's kids that living with their parents. Now, I lied. There actually is one set of indicators that left behind children do worse than children living with their parents, and that's in non-cognitive psychological indicators that a higher share of left behind children. And if you look in the literature, loneliness, depression and that kind of thing done by other scholars, these left behind children do worse. So perhaps in the longer run, there's going to be worse educational, income, labor market outcomes than we're seeing with the current one. So the conclusion, when looking at rural kids, children living with their parents are actually more or equally vulnerable than left behind children. So this calls into question these new policy initiatives. There's actually 8 ministries that have policy. In the last People's Congress, there were 8 ministries that introduced legislation to try to target left behind children with extra resources or extra programs. Almost none of them have been, there's little action yet, but so why? You know, I mean, certainly there's this sort of care-income trade-off, right? And if you have both your parents working, you know, off the farm in factories, earning $2.50 an hour, working 2,000 hours a year, you know, you probably got an income of 10 to 12,000 US dollars, and so that they have much more resources. So it's then if mom and dad are working on the farm, you're probably only making $2,000 to $3,000 a year. So it's probably an income differential, but you have to care. So certainly migration of both parents increases income. These children living with their parents' families are relatively poor. And of course, what we didn't do was ask for the human capital of grandma, right? Of the caregiver who stayed behind. And we're starting adding that to our questionnaires right now, because we've done it with one survey now, and what we see is that the grandmas, you know, are alive, and they actually do better on small language scores. We give them small language scales. We give them very simple self-confidence scales, and the grandmas that are behind are much more capable, that are watching children and left behind child families are much more capable than grandmas when children are living with their parents. So there's a lot of selection that are going on here. So of course these aren't causal relationships. You know, so we're trying to think, is there an IV where we can identify the impact? We can't think of any IVs, so we're just going to run this regression and try to hold constant assets and parent education and see, you know, what we would expect is once we hold that constant, that left behind child coefficient should go up, right? Is like actually, income aside, they are more vulnerable, right? It's because they have all this income. So let's hold income and are we going to see that goes up? And we're going to control for a whole bunch of right-hand side variables. So let's first all look at the univariate relationship between assets. This is our asset index and rate of anemia. And you can see, yes, these kids that are richer, their rates of anemia fall. And if we look at left behind children and children living with their parents, now this, I should say, this is from one study. This isn't from, I forgot to say that this is from our most recent 2012-2013 study. So this is 2012 data. And in this particular study, left behind children actually were slightly more anemic. But you can see over time and across assets that they do, you know, much, that as assets get higher, these malnutrition falls. So when we run regressions on this, what we find is, if not just holding county fixed effects, that's what we said, at the 10% level, we see left behind children are slightly more anemic in this one sample, okay? Overall, they actually are less anemic, but in this sample. And then as we start to control for all these characteristics, school fixed effects, children characteristics, household characteristics, including assets at the end, so this is in parent education, really what happened, nothing changes, right? In fact, it goes down. We're sort of thinking it was going to come up, right? That, I think that, that's on anemia. We do the same thing with standardized Chinese and math test scores, and you can see as people get richer, their test scores go up in the cross section. There's actually, and we see at very low levels at poor assets, as assets increase, is the test scores for left behind children and for children it goes up. Look at this when they get about at the median, after the median, the test scores of left behind children actually fall. So that's a very interesting relationship that we want to spend more time on. So maybe we do need to worry about left behind children, and something's happening to these families as they get, to the upper income quartile, and we don't quite know what that is. But the main thing for this particular talk that we're interested in is, here we go, left behind children have a 0.5 standard deviations higher test scores. Okay, so they test at a higher rate. And as we start to control for characteristics, it doesn't go away. It's still 0.5. So that...
The main issue is parents making decisions taking into account children's.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I think we're 100% on...
We have the same result if you just run OLS. But as soon as you instrument it, you will see the
Yeah, so we're thinking more policy, right? Is do we want to go out here and, try to deliver who should we deliver programs to, right? And what Sean's going to look like is who's responsive to these programs. So, and that was a little separate issue. We're saying who deserves them or who do we want to target, and from here, it still doesn't look like whatever you can observe. The left behind children do better, right?
Can you go back to the previous slide? Yeah. So one of the reasons you might see this pattern is that family income goes up with duration as a migrant in the cities, so that what you're actually picking up is longer duration of being a left behind child here, which may have more.
Sure.
More
no, and I think that there's a lot going on there. You're going to see when we get to the migrant communities, duration matters a lot. We have much better measures of duration of migrants and how long the kids have been in the city, and that matters a lot. So I would suspect that might be what's happening here too. So it's yeah, I think it's.
Recently we did the prisoner survey, which as well as the migrant. And no matter what you do, what control you put in, the left behind children is always significant.
Better.
No, worse.
Well, but.
Whether they commit crime or not.
But that's fine. I mean, it may be the long-term of the non-cognitive, the consequences of the non-cognitive. So we're doing a lot of work with dropouts, and dropout isn't correlated with left behind children, but we've now done about 100 interviews with dropouts. Half of them are left behind and half of them aren't. And we see this. I mean, the dropouts who are left behind children are angry. They will self-report that they're involved in crime, and the other ones who are children who live with their parents that dropped out are in the labor market and trying to earn. I think there's something to that, right? And so, but instead of trying to give them more resources, we should try to think about sort of more supportive type relationships. And
so how easy is it for the parents to bring their kids with them?
That's next. I'm going to talk about that next. There's probably more children living with their parents in the cities than there are left behind children. So there's more 流动儿童, right? So there's more.
The other thing that this might be picking up is that the parent, it's sort of the selection factor, like the parents that have enough assets that they are able to bring their kids to their place of migration, but they're still not bringing them over.
Okay. Well, let me wait on the migrant. It's a good question. Exactly. So it's yeah.
Have
John.
you looked at gender differences in these effects? Because there's this recent U.S. work that shows the boys are much more affected by, let's say, not having a father around than the girls. So I was wondering if there'd be a similar effect here.
Okay. So this paper is our 19 data sets stacked up on left behind children. We're just finishing one on gender differences. Then we want to do the interactions between the two.
Sure.
The gender there's surprisingly few gender differences now. I mean, maybe not, right? As China's got richer and as girls become more valuable, health, education, nutrition, girls are better than boys in about half the outcomes, the same in a quarter, and inferior in a quarter. So in some mega sense, they're better off than boys.
That's across all families?
Yes, across all families. So we haven't done the interactions. I think it's a really good idea, right? So it's okay. Okay, and we've looked at that. So in summary, right, even when controlling for observables, left behind children aren't worse off than children living with their parents. There's many unobservables, right? These LBC families may be more aggressive, more capable, smarter in their livelihood strategies, of course, right? And this is what we're seeing. There is a cost in non-cognitive outcomes, and I think that Mengxin had a very good point that it looks like it's being realized in samples that were left behind 10 years ago. But until the research is done, there's no reason to target them. I think the main point from our part of the paper is there's serious health, nutrition, and education problems in rural China today. And remember, this is we think it's half of the population. Half of 5-year-olds are in the communities we're studying. So it's at 47%. So if you take all rural western counties and all mid, median, and below medium counties in central China and count them as poor, rural, they count for 47% of 5-year-olds. So this is half of China that has these severe health nutrition consequences. So here's the rest of them, Jane. These rural households that have moved taken their kids with them to the city, we call these migrant children. In the early 1980s, of course, we know there was zero. We have our national survey National Land and Labor Survey that I've done with the Chinese Academy of Sciences. Our first big wave was in 2000. We asked every village leader and accountant to say, between 1983 and 2000, how many households have actually moved to the city, have left the village and moved to the city? And it was about 2% of the households at that time. And so it was about 10 million households or so. And by 2008, it had raised to 8%, or about 40 million households. Now, some of them take their kids and leave them behind with uncles and aunts, right? We don't pick that up. We think there's probably a half to one kid per household here. So there's probably 20 or 30 million children that have gone into the cities with their parents. There's no data on this. And so that's a guesstimate, okay? And so this is what the households will look like. Our big samples from our Beijing migrant sample and Shanghai Suzhou migrant sample and a Hangzhou sample, 3 samples that are about 4,000. I'm sorry, family size is 3.9, 3.8, exactly the same as the rural households that are there. Grandma, remember, was co-resident with the family in about 40% of households in rural areas. 25% of households. It's less than half in these migrant families. 85% are mom, dad, and kid living together. So if you go to any kid, a migrant kid, and he's mainly living with mom and dad. So 25, and there's 0 left behind children. Yeah, 1 or 2, right? I mean, that live with uncles or something like that. But there's almost no left behind children, almost by definition, right? So we're running out of time. I want to leave Sean some time to do here. So I'm going to skip over much of this. But the question is what is the human capital of these kids? They're supposed to be able to go to urban schools. When they get to go to urban schools, they score almost as good as urban students. So you put a migrant in an urban school and they score almost as good as. Now a caveat is that these are peri-urban suburban schools, so they aren't the best students out there, but not bad. So, but the other caveat is they can only go to urban schools when there's room in urban schools, and the best estimate in Beijing is only 30% of these migrants are in Beijing urban schools, and it's and our estimates in Suzhou are less than 20%, in Hangzhou it's 30%, in Xi'an it's 15%. All the rest are in private, unregulated, underfunded migrant schools. And you can see when you compare with standardized exams, there's about one standard deviation. Now, we know, too, that there's lots of heterogeneity there. But if we compare unobserved heterogeneity, if we compare the migrant students versus the rural students, we actually find that they do better than the rural students. So this is what they're taking their good students with them, or capable parents are taking their kids with them. And so when you compare migrant students with rural students, they actually do better on standardized tests. But when you control for a whole bunch of characteristics, that becomes negative, okay? So it's basically you control for assets, you control for para-education, that being in an urban migrant school hurts you, and especially for kids that have been there for 3 years and longer. If you look at them who've been there 3 years and longer, these migrant students that came being much better than their rural counterparts have suddenly become worse. So they're deteriorating over the time that they're in these urban migrant schools. The pattern is exactly the same in Hangzhou as Beijing. Here's the best study we've done. We went to Shanghai, Suzhou, and did a very large sample in 100 schools, and 20% of them were from Anhui. We then went back to the same communities that they were from in Anhui, and in the same week gave a standardized test to the Anhui rural kids and then the Anhui migrant kids. And you can see the Anhui rural kids scored about 0.7 standard deviations higher than Anhui urban kids. Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's astounding difference. So human capital is not improving there. I'm not going to, they're doing bad because we aren't investing in them. The teachers are worse and the facilities are worse. If you go to other indicators of health, so anemia, and you look at babies, so toddlers who live in rural areas and toddlers who have moved to the city with their parents, the rates of anemia are exactly the same right here. So if you look at levels of myopia, they're exactly the same between rural and urban, and the levels of treatment with glasses are exactly the same. And I don't know if, so in other words, that is the reason that their health indicators are just as bad as rural is one of two things. One is health services are much less available in urban areas, and two is it's sort of, you can take the boy out of the country, but can you take the country out of the boy, is that behavior changes very slowly. So Sean, why don't you finish up the next couple minutes?
Okay, so as Scott said, kind of REAP's main business is running randomized control trials. So health and education type interventions targeting and children and youth is what REAP's mainly been doing. And as we've been doing these periodically, we'll see some kind of interesting heterogeneous effects by family structure. And at that time, we'll try to tell a story about why this may be one way or another. Here, we're trying to do that kind of more systematically by putting a bunch of these interventions that we've done over the past few years together and seeing if we can draw any general lessons about about kind of how family structure influences how, or kind of responses to these different interventions. Okay. All right, and this could be interesting for a couple of reasons. So one thing is, it may tell us kind of given how families are transitioning, what types of interventions may be most effective in raising health and education outcomes later on down the road. But also, if there are big differences across different types of families, it may be cost effective to try to target interventions to one type or another. For example, these policies targeting LBCs, right? The benefit of that may be justified, may justify kind of that extra cost. So, all right. So what are we doing? So far, we've put together kind of 21 different interventions. That's from REAP RCTs we've done so far. So eventually, this will be about 50 or so. And we're just going back and using the main model from each of these papers and re-estimating the main model using kind of looking at the main primary outcome and re-estimating things, including this interaction term with the treatment and the family. And so very, very kind of simple stuff. And then taking these kind of estimated treatment effects by family structure and putting them together and kind of basic.
Whether the family type is randomly assigned?
No, no. So this is.
It has nothing to do with the randomized control trial, because when you interact this thing,
Right.
people who, whether they're migrated or not, it's not randomly assigned.
Sure. Yeah, we're not going to be able to say anything causal about why it is.
Okay.
And I won't even try to kind of tell a story about in general about why we see different types of kind of heterogeneity, but we can see this type of family response to this type of intervention in this way, right?
The family structure might change with the treatment as well.
Not over the course of kind of the trials that we're looking at. So these are usually 1 year.
Sorry, what does family look like? Because
So.
yeah, what would be how would you code family?
So I'll show you. Yeah. So it's the same way he coded it. So here we're just looking at.
Remind me, please.
Yeah. Sorry, we're just looking at kind of parent migration status, basically.
But that's the outcome, isn't it? Is the family? I was just wondering if it's just family size or something, then I think A3 does have a causal interpretation. If it's obviously migrant, non-migrant in family, then of course it doesn't have a causal interpretation.
Right. Yeah.
So,
So
yes.
So we haven't looked at We haven't looked at family size yet. It's just parent migration status, kind of at the baseline of the trial.
So that's not the outcome. That's the independent variable.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Right. It's all baseline. It's all so the parent migration status is from baseline, and then we're looking at kind of impacts on health and education outcomes later. Okay, sorry. Okay. All right. So here, just to kind of give you an idea of the types of interventions we're talking about. So a few examples. So here, for example, we have we sent a letter to households telling them that their child was anemic. This is one type of intervention. And then giving multivitamins in schools on a daily basis that contain iron, providing life counseling classes to junior high kids, so giving out free eyeglasses, these kind of things. So these are the types of interventions we're talking about. And all this is here is I've done a test across those interaction terms, and kind of these are the p-values. So we have kind of longer bar is a lower p-value here, right? And so we have, in general, we don't have kind of within individual studies a lot of power to see kind of the, significant differences in treatment effects right here. But like I said, it's kind of a power issue. But then what we've done is try to combine these treatment effects across the different studies and look at, kind of, what the level of the estimated effect is across the different family types. So here we have, this is for all families here, and then this is children living with their parents, LBCs, and then children with a migrant father but mother at home. And this is pooling all studies together and kind of standardizing the effects And so one interesting thing here, once you do that, you see kind of significantly larger impacts across all these studies on families that have a migrant father and mother at home. Okay, so to make this a little bit more useful, we've broken these out and tried to classify the interventions a little bit. So on one dimension, we're looking at kind of what are the interventions providing. So we've classified one type as providing, mainly providing resources to households, and another one is providing primarily information or training. And then second, we're looking at kind of what's required on the part of the household to respond to the interventions, right? So does it require households to invest more resources, right? So for example, if you give them some type of information about anemia, they may be, right, they may need to provide more meat to their kids and that kind of thing. And then here does it, it may not, the intervention may not require households to provide more resources, but it may require kind of a larger change in behavior. And then third, we're looking at kind of how the interventions vary across different age groups. So toddlers and infants and primary school age kids, and then secondary school age children. And then finally, we'll look at a few examples where they're primarily just school-based and don't really require much change on the part of the households. Okay. So here are kind of those mean effects for the 11 interventions that we have so far that are looking at that kind of mainly just provide resources of some type, right? And here we see, again, kind of the largest effect is among these households with a migrant father and then mother at home, right? So one reason, right, could be that they have resources to respond, right, or they have kind of the nurture at home to be able to respond to these things. Okay, here's an one specific example. So in this study, we provided financial aid to junior high kids for high school. So he said, if you go to high school, we'll pay for it. Here we find that kind of the LBC children, right, and children with a migrant father respond the most to that intervention, where children living with their parents don't, right? And so, one possible reason is that once you give them financial aid, right? This is impact on kind of their aspirations for going to academic high. One reason could be they don't feel as much of a burden, right? So a lot of them say, you talk to these kids, a lot of them say that, oh, my dad's working outside or my mom's working outside, and they feel that going on in school and provides kind of a larger burden on their parents, and this may relieve that a little bit. So, all right. So interventions that provide information. So interestingly here, so we see the largest effect among children who live with both of their parents. So that might be, what you expect. For example, when we train families on myopia and the use of eyeglasses, so mainly eyeglasses don't cause myopia. Kind of a larger proportion, particularly in the CLP group, are more likely to go and buy glasses and wear glasses.
Sean, how much more time do you need, you think?
It's quick, 2 minutes. All right, so let me just go through here. And here, so households that, if you give them a voucher to redeem glasses in the county seat, then children that live with their grandparents, so grandparents always take them to go get something for free. Call this the kind of grandmother or mother-in-law effect, based on my mother-in-law. But once you provide them training, see the CLPs are also likely to go redeem the voucher for these free eyeglasses. Okay. All right, resources. So here we see kind of the same pattern as the overall pattern. Let me skip ahead here. Okay. All right, so interventions requiring a change in caregiver behavior, right? We see still kind of a larger effect among these households with a migrant father, mother at home. All right, this is from a study where we're looking at providing nutrition packets to infants and toddlers. Actually, there aren't very many kids at this stage that are pure LBCs. But again, so we see largest reductions in anemia among children whose fathers out working. And then, right, and then when you send a reminder text, right, the CLPs respond kind of the most to that.
They all have enough resources. I thought it was the trade-off between migration getting more income versus more parental care.
Mm-hmm.
But all the effect you show seems to suggest that migrant children do not have enough resources.
That migrant children don't have enough resources?
Yeah.
So,
When you gave them resources, they respond.
right.
So do they
I
or
mean,
do
there
they
could
not?
be things. Yeah, there are a bunch of different
sure,
reasons,
but-
right?
Compliments.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
But you-
yeah.
you
I mean,
need
it could
to
be
have a
100
consistent
different things,
story.
right? Yeah.
Well, there is another dimension, that is, how do you separate the kind of interventions? A financial intervention, for example, could also be, there is information associated with the financial intervention, and in fact, there may be even a social aspect to it too. So in that sense, actually, yeah, I think it's very important to try to think about how, in fact, even a purely resource-based intervention may be actually much more than simply the resource in itself, but actually could be social, could be informational.
Really not any effects we are talking about, as they pointed out earlier, because the family thing is a choice thing, so they are not, so all those analysis is, right, it's just some descriptive thing.
Right.
No effect, the wording, no
Well,
effect.
there's I'm coming to the average effect across families is causal, but the difference is not
Average
causal.
effect, it's not the effect.
It's a randomized control trial, so. The differences across family is not causal, right? Yeah. But
There's
this
no,
one-
there's no response of the family from the baseline to the inline, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, they've already made their decisions, but those households that are out there, that's how they're responding to the
Right,
trial.
but the family type is reflecting an unobserved thing on the right-hand side.
Sure.
So it's endogenous, so it's, yeah.
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, think of this more as targeting, right?
Could I ask about the endogenous family? In a lot of these migration stories, you have people from one county or province tend to go to a specific city. And I'm wondering if you can use sort of economic, and that varies across the counties, and if you could use economic conditions in the destination, let's say relative to economic decisions in
So
the
the differential
conditions
kind
in
of,
the
yeah.
base as an instrument. And that might be worth trying, given it would be nice if we could put a causal
Right.
interpretation.
Okay, I think I'm running out of time here, so I'll show you quickly kind of across age group. So here, actually, we only have kind of one study for now that's targeting toddlers and infants, and that's the one you just saw. So one thing we see here is, among kind of interventions targeting primary school age children, there's kind of less heterogeneity, and then those targeting secondary school age children, for some reason, interventions tend to be less effective among CLP households, right? And finally, some interventions don't require as much response on the part of the household, right? So, for example, this is providing computer-assisted learning in schools, right? And we see that kind of effects are pretty homogeneous across the different family types. Okay, and then providing multivitamins in school. So the effects on LBCs was a little bit higher, but it's not significant. Okay, so in general, so we don't have power in the individual studies really to see a significant heterogeneous effect. So it's insignificant for 18 out of the 21 that we've done so far. Where there are differences, they generally require kind of substantial change in kind of family behavior or investment in resources at home. For many of these interventions, for some reason, they're most effective when dad is out and mom's still at home with the child. Providing information generally is more effective when both parents are at home. We see that. We also don't see that kind of LBCs are benefiting more from these interventions than kind of other family types in general, right? So that maybe policies targeting, for example, LBCs may not be as cost effective on that, or cost effective just on that basis, right? And so going forward, we're going to try to add more interventions to this analysis and do the meta-analysis more formally.